Why was everyone so quiet when she walked into the room? Not the kind of quiet that comes with respect. No, this was heavier, as if the air itself hesitated. She caught their eyes, those quick flickers of recognition, of doubt, and then just as quickly they dropped back to the files in front of them, to the maps, to the steaming cups of coffee cooling on metal tables. She stood there not saying a word. Her boots carried the weight of dust and distance. Her uniform wasn't new. The faded edges of the patches told stories they hadn't asked about. She felt it, the unspoken question on their faces, why her? The briefing officer cleared his throat. His voice was steady, but his hands gave him away. He fiddled with the corner of his notes as though the paper might reveal a way out. "We've got a problem," he said, "one we can't afford to get wrong." On the screen behind him, a map came alive with red marks and shifting coordinates. A mission, critical, risky, the kind of operation that demanded trust, something she didn't have, not from them, not yet. She listened, silent, watching the shapes on the map turn into a puzzle of danger and opportunity. She already knew the terrain, she studied it, lived it, even bled on it. But she didn't speak, not yet. There was something she hadn't told them, and she wasn't ready to. The officer paused. "We'll need someone on the ground, someone precise, someone who won't break." His gaze flicked toward her for the briefest second. She caught it, the room caught it, and suddenly the quiet deepened. They all knew what he was suggesting. She kept her face calm, but inside something shifted. A memory stirred, the sound of a door slamming years ago, the echo of a voice that never returned. She blinked it away. Not here, not now. "Questions?" the officer asked. The others spoke, men with rough voices. One mentioned weather, another asked about evac routes, another fuel limits. Their words built a wall around her, pretending she wasn't there, pretending she wasn't the one who might carry the weight of this mission on her shoulders. When it was her turn, she finally spoke. Her voice cut through the room, not loud, not demanding, but steady. "What happens if we fail?" No one answered, not right away. They weren't used to that kind of question. The officer shifted his stance. His silence told her everything. Failure wasn't on the table, but failure was always possible. She knew that better than anyone. The meeting ended, papers closed, chairs scraped against the floor. One by one they filed out, their conversations hushed, their eyes careful not to meet hers. She stayed behind, staring at the map still glowing on the wall. Her breath came slow, her chest tight. The mission was dangerous, yes, but there was something more, something personal buried deep in those coordinates. She pressed her hand against the cold surface of the table. She remembered that terrain not as lines and shapes, but as smells, sounds, scars. She remembered the weight of loss there, a place where part of her life had ended quietly without ceremony. And now she was being sent back. The barracks that night were filled with noise, boots clattering, laughter too sharp, stories told to hide fear. She sat on her bunk apart, her rifle leaned against the wall beside her. The metal gleamed faintly in the dim light. She ran her fingers along it, slow, deliberate, like tracing old words she still couldn't say out loud. One of the younger soldiers, Collins, approached, nervous but curious. He carried an energy that hadn't been worn down yet. "They say you don't talk much," he said, half a smile on his face. She looked at him, not unkindly. "Maybe I don't need to." He hesitated, then nodded, pretending to understand, but his eyes lingered as if searching for the truth behind her quiet. Finally, he muttered, "Just good luck tomorrow," and walked away. She lay back on her bunk, eyes fixed on the ceiling. The sounds of the barracks faded. In their place, a different sound rose in her memory, the sound of a single breath, ragged, breaking, cut short too soon. She closed her eyes, tried to will it away. It stayed. At dawn, the air was cold, not sharp, not cruel, just cold enough to remind her she was alive. She checked her gear. Each strap, each buckle, each piece of metal that could mean the difference between returning and never returning. She moved with a kind of ritual, methodical, respectful. The transport hummed, waiting, engines low, steady like a heartbeat, soldiers gathered ready. She stood among them, but apart she always did. When the ramp closed behind them, the world outside disappeared. Inside, it was just breath and silence. She felt the eyes of the others on her, not hostility, not quite, just uncertainty. One of them, Ramirez, leaned close. Older, tired lines on his face. He whispered, "You ever been there before?" She looked at him. She thought about lying, thought about saying nothing. Instead, she let a fragment slip. "Once." Ramirez studied her, his eyes softened, but he said nothing more. Maybe he knew better. Maybe he carried ghosts of his own. The flight stretched on, the steady hum blurred into memory, into thoughts she couldn't control. She remembered another flight, another ramp, another set of faces she would never see again. She clenched her fists, grounding herself in the present. When they landed, the world greeted them with dust. Fine, dry, clinging dust that coated their boots, their skin, their lungs. The kind of dust that seemed to remember every drop of blood it had ever absorbed. She stepped onto the ground. The sun was high, relentless. The heat wrapped around her, heavy, unyielding. But beneath it all was something colder, familiar, a memory waiting at the edge of recognition. The squad spread out, scanning, checking. She knelt, pressing her hand into the dirt. She felt it raw and real. The ground didn't forget, neither did she. They moved, careful, alert. The world around them buzzed with unseen eyes. She felt it, every shadow a question, every sound an unfinished thought. She led without asking, not because they trusted her, but because her steps were sure. She knew where to place her feet, when to pause, when to lower her breath to silence. Hours passed, the sun shifted. Sweat traced lines down her face, stung her eyes. She didn't wipe it away. She welcomed the sting, it kept her sharp. By evening they reached the edge of a broken village. Houses empty, walls crumbled, windows shattered, silence pressed in. Collins muttered, "Looks dead." She shook her head quietly, "Nothing's ever dead." And then, as if to prove her right, a sound, faint, a rustle, the kind that doesn't belong to wind, the kind that belongs to people trying not to be heard. Her heart slowed, her eyes sharpened. She raised her hand, signaling the squad to stop, every motion deliberate, every breath counted. The silence grew, stretched. She scanned the shadows, waiting, knowing. And there it was, a figure at the edge of a ruined doorway, small, unsteady. A child. Her chest tightened, her throat caught. She lowered her rifle, slow, careful. The child's eyes met hers, wide, dark, carrying something too heavy for that small frame. The squad shifted, uneasy, fingers near triggers, fear edged their breath. She raised her hand again, not a command, a plea, "Hold, wait." The child stepped forward, clutching something. Not a weapon, not food, just a piece of cloth, torn, faded. She recognized it, her heart cracked. It was the same pattern, the same color, from years ago, from someone she had lost here. Her knees almost gave. She steadied herself, forcing air into her lungs. The squad looked at her, confused, waiting for orders. She didn't speak, couldn't, not yet. The child stopped a few feet away, silent, holding out the cloth. And in that moment time bent, past and present collided, the mission, the squad, the danger, it all faded. What remained was her memory, her loss, her reason for being here. She reached out, her hand trembling. For the first time her silence broke, a whisper, barely more than breath. "Where did you get this?" The child didn't answer, just stared, eyes deep, unreadable. Behind her the squad shifted again. Someone whispered her name, asking what to do. But she couldn't answer, not yet, because the mission had just changed. And none of them knew it. Why did the cloth feel heavier than any weapon she had ever carried? Her hand closed around it, trembling. The fabric was frayed, edges torn by time, dust, maybe even blood. And yet the color, the faint, faded hue, was unmistakable. She remembered it clinging to another hand once. A hand she had held until the earth pulled it away from her. The child's stare didn't waver. Those eyes said nothing and everything all at once. Too old for that small face, too knowing. Behind her, Ramirez whispered, "We don't have time for this." His voice was urgent, clipped, but he didn't understand. None of them did. She drew a slow breath. The mission, the objective, the squad, they were counting on her to decide, to lead. But her pulse was already elsewhere, pulled back to a night that had never left her. A night when the same ground beneath her boots had swallowed a promise she could never fulfill. The officer's words from the briefing echoed in her mind. "We need someone who won't break." But what if she already had? The child lowered his eyes, clutching at the air as if the cloth was still his. Then, without warning, he turned and darted into the ruins. "Wait," her voice cracked louder than she intended. The squad startled. Collins raised his rifle. "Orders?" he asked, panic edging his tone. She swallowed hard, forcing her voice steady. "No shots, follow him." They hesitated, but they obeyed. Boots moved, careful yet rushed, crunching through stone and ash as they pursued the flickering shadow of the child. The ruins seemed alive now. Every corner a question, every darkened doorway a mouth waiting to swallow them whole. The air was thick, dry, but it carried whispers, unseen movement, breaths caught in hiding. She knew it wasn't just the child. Villages never stayed this silent unless silence was forced. They reached a collapsed archway, rubble piled like broken teeth. The boy slipped through a narrow gap too small for them to follow. She crouched, her cheeks scraping rough stone as she tried to glimpse where he had gone. Nothing, just the echo of bare feet fading deeper into the maze. Ramirez cursed under his breath. This is bad ground, could be a trap. She didn't answer, couldn't, her thoughts spun too fast. The cloth burned in her palm like fire. Why here, why now? Was this chance, or something pulling her back into the very wound she had spent years burying? The squad spread out, forming a cautious perimeter. Collins kept glancing at her, waiting for direction. The kid was too eager, too green, his fear worn openly across his face. She recognized that fear, she remembered wearing it once. Her eyes swept the ruins. The shadows shifted with the sinking sun, stretching long and sharp. She could feel the weight of unseen eyes again, not just one child, more, watching, measuring, deciding. The mission's objective pressed at the edges of her mind like a constant drumbeat, but the cloth in her hands screamed louder, and she couldn't shake the question clawing at her chest. Was he connected? Was this her chance to finally know? She pulled her squad closer, voices low. We move at dusk, quiet, no unnecessary fire, eyes sharp. Ramirez frowned. That's not what command ordered. She met his gaze. Command isn't here. His jaw tightened, but he said nothing. Maybe he saw it in her eyes that this wasn't just about orders anymore. As night bled across the ruins, the world shifted again. Darkness wasn't just absence of light here, it was presence, thick, breathing, the kind of darkness that held secrets in its chest and whispered them only to those who listened long enough. She listened. They advanced slowly, each step measured, each sound magnified. Gravel under boots, the creak of straps, the distant bark of a dog cut short. Then voices faint ahead, a language she knew enough to understand the tone if not every word. Urgency, fear, plans whispered under cover of dark. She signaled halt, the squad froze, breath shallow, rifles steady. They crouched behind a crumbled wall, peering into a courtyard where dim firelight flickered. Figures moved, 5, maybe 6, armed, their silhouettes sharp against the fire. And there, at the edge of the light, the child. Her chest tightened again. He stood close to one of the men, almost pressed into his side, not prisoner, not terrified, familiar. Collins whispered too loud, is he with them? She silenced him with a look. Her thoughts raced. If the boy belonged to them, then what did that mean? Had he been bait, a lure, or worse, was the cloth he carried meant to reach her specifically? A surge of heat flared in her chest. Paranoia maybe, or intuition. Out here they were the same thing. One of the men stepped forward, closer to the firelight. His face revealed in sharp angles, scarred cheek, eyes hardened by years of survival. She knew his type. Fighters who lived not for cause, but for vengeance. Ramirez leaned close, whispering, that's him, that's our link. The objective, the reason command had sent them, the figure in front of them was the key. She should have felt relief, but all she felt was a cold wave rising from the pit of her stomach, because standing so near him, clutching his side like safety itself, was the boy. Her mission and her memory had collided into one impossible choice. Collins shifted, we've got a shot. She grabbed his rifle, pressing it down, not yet. Ma'am, not yet. Her voice was steel, the kind that brooked no argument. Collins froze. The group by the fire laughed suddenly, a rough, jarring sound that carried too far into the night. The boy flinched, just for a second, just enough for her to see it. He wasn't safe, not really. The scarred man placed a hand on the boy's shoulder, too heavy, too familiar. The boy didn't resist, but his eyes flicked outward, toward the shadows where she hid. And for a heartbeat, their gazes locked again. She felt it deep in her chest, a plea silent, fragile, terrifying. Her breath hitched, her grip tightened on the cloth. Ramirez whispered, we take him now. But she shook her head, too many angles, too many lives at risk. The wrong move and the boy would be the first to fall. She leaned closer, whispering back, we wait. Ramirez cursed softly but obeyed. Minutes bled into each other, thick and slow. The fire crackled, the men muttered. The boy's shoulders sagged under the weight of a hand that didn't belong to him. Her mind churned, memories of another child, another loss, another silence she had carried for years. She couldn't let it happen again. But the mission, the squad, their lives hung on her decision. The firelight flared, sparks spiraling into the dark, and in that fragile flicker of distraction she saw it, the boy's hand twitch, subtle, deliberate. He pointed, barely, toward the scarred man's weapon resting against a stone. Her pulse quickened, a sign, a choice. She looked at Ramirez, he saw it too. His eyes widened, then narrowed, waiting for her call. This was it, the moment, the line between duty and something deeper. Her throat tightened, but her voice came steady, on my mark. The squad readied, hearts racing, fingers tense on triggers. The night held its breath. And then she moved. The mark came with a breath, not a word, just the steady release of air from her lungs, soft but certain, like a tide giving way to shore. The squad moved, silent, precise, years of training collapsing into seconds. Ramirez swung low, Collins high. The world shifted from waiting to acting in the space between heartbeats. The scarred man turned, instinct sharp, survival carved into his very muscles. His hand snapped toward his weapon, but she was already moving. Her rifle came up smooth, practiced, the sight locked on his chest, but she hesitated just half a beat, because the boy was still there, pressed against him, too close. The scarred man shoved the child forward, using him like a shield. The boy stumbled, falling into the dirt, his small frame catching the firelight for an instant. And in that flash, she saw his eyes again, fear now, raw and unhidden. The shot rang out, but it wasn't hers. Ramirez fired. The scarred man staggered, weapon slipping from his hand, body jerking back into shadow. The fire hissed as blood sprayed across its edge. Chaos followed, shouts, gunfire. The courtyard exploded into sound and movement, figures scrambled, rifles cracking in the night. The squad pressed forward, cutting angles, returning fire with precision. She didn't think, she acted. Her focus split in two, half on the fight, half on the boy scrambling across the dirt, trying to escape the storm of bullets that chewed the ground around him. "Cover right," Collins shouted, firing bursts into the darkness. She dove forward, sliding across broken stone, pulling the boy against her chest. His body shook, breath ragged, but he clung to her as though he had known her his whole life. Her heart slammed, she could feel his ribs through the thin fabric of his shirt. He was too small, too fragile for this. She whispered into his hair, "Hold on, just hold on." The squad tightened formation, driving the fighters back into the ruins. Gunfire echoed, then dimmed. Silence, fractured, returned in pieces. When the last echo died, Ramirez spat into the dirt. Objective down. His voice was flat, detached, the kind of tone soldiers used to mask the weight of what just happened. But she wasn't listening to him. Her attention was on the boy in her arms. His breath hitched. His hands clutched the cloth she had taken earlier, gripping it like it was life itself. Collins lowered his rifle, stepping closer. "Ma'am, what about the kid?" Her jaw tightened. The mission hadn't planned for this. No one had expected a child, no one but her. She stood, pulling the boy gently to his feet. He swayed but stayed upright, eyes wide, locked on hers. There was trust there now, fragile, tentative, but real. "We take him," she said. Ramirez's head snapped toward her. "What? That's not the plan. Command wants confirmation, not baggage." Her glare cut sharp enough to silence him. "He's not baggage." Ramirez pressed his lips together, shaking his head, muttering under his breath, but he didn't push further. They regrouped quickly, stripping weapons from the fallen, checking wounds, scanning the shadows for more movement. The air smelled of smoke and iron. She kept the boy close, her hand resting on his shoulder. His breathing began to slow, though tremors still rippled through him. He wouldn't speak, not yet, but she didn't need words. His silence said enough. The squad moved out. The night seemed thicker now, pressing harder against them. Every step felt weighted, pulled between the mission they had been given and the responsibility none of them had expected. She felt it too. The boy was more than a complication, he was a question, one she didn't yet have the courage to answer. By dawn they reached a ridge overlooking the valley. The world below stretched endless, mountains folding into each other, rivers carving scars into the earth, beautiful, ruthless. They settled into cover, resting in turns. Collins collapsed against his pack, exhaustion pulling his eyelids heavy. Ramirez sat sharpening his knife, metal against stone rasping in steady rhythm. She sat apart, the boy beside her. His small hands picked at the frayed edges of the cloth. Her chest ached watching him. Finally she asked softly, "What's your name?" The boy didn't answer, just looked at her with those wide, unreadable eyes. She tried again, "Do you understand me?" A pause, then the slightest nod. Hope flickered, fragile, dangerous hope. She smiled, faint, rare. "It's okay, you don't have to talk yet." Ramirez muttered without looking up, "Kid's going to get us killed." Her eyes snapped toward him. "He's the reason we're still alive. Don't forget who pointed out that weapon." Ramirez's sharpening paused just for a second, then he resumed, rasp, rasp, rasp. Collins stirred, sitting up. "Ma'am, why'd you stop us from taking the shot earlier? You had him clean, but you didn't fire." The question hit harder than gunfire. She looked away down the valley where the sun was beginning to claw its way up. Why hadn't she fired? The answer pulsed inside her, dangerous and personal, because she had seen another child once. Because she had pulled the trigger before and the cost had never left her. Because the cloth in her pocket was more than fabric, it was memory, loss, guilt stitched into threads. But she couldn't tell them that, not yet. Instead, she said simply, "Because there was more at stake than the shot." Collins didn't understand, she saw it in his face, but he nodded anyway, pretending. The boy shifted closer to her, almost leaning into her side. She let him, didn't push him away. The valley wind picked up, carrying scents of smoke from far-off fires. She closed her eyes briefly, feeling the weight of it all pressing down. The mission wasn't over, it had barely begun. By midday they moved again. Down the ridge, across broken ground, through narrow passes where the rocks felt too close, too watchful. The boy kept pace, surprisingly quiet, his small feet landing carefully as though he had learned stealth not from games but from survival. She noticed everything about him. At one point, when the squad paused for water, she crouched beside him again. "That cloth," she said softly, "where did you get it?" His fingers tightened around it, his eyes flicked away, silence. Her chest squeezed, she didn't push, but the ache inside her grew sharper. They pressed on until dusk painted the world red and gold. By then, exhaustion hung heavy. The squad found a hollow among rocks to settle in for the night. As darkness fell, she sat awake, rifle across her knees, watching the boy sleep curled against his pack. His face softened in sleep, years of fear stripped away, revealing just a child. just a child who should never have been here. And as she watched him, her memory returned uninvited. A little girl's laughter, sharp and bright in the small apartment she had once called home. A face that had been hers to protect, a face she had failed. Her throat tightened, she pressed her palms against her eyes, forcing the memory back. Not now, not when others needed her steady. But the boy stirred in his sleep, murmuring words too soft to catch. And she felt it again, the thread connecting her past to this fragile, impossible present. She whispered into the night, too low for anyone else to hear, "I won't fail you too." The wind answered, cold and hollow. Why did silence always feel louder after survival? The rocks around them were still. The night stretched endless, but every breath carried the memory of gunfire. The squad shifted in restless sleep, shoulders tight, hands near weapons even in dreams. She didn't sleep, couldn't. Her eyes stayed fixed on the boy curled beside her pack, his chest rising and falling with fragile rhythm. In the pale moonlight, he looked almost weightless, as if the world hadn't yet decided whether to keep him or let him go. Her thoughts churned, the cloth in his hand, the way his gaze had locked onto hers, the choice she had made not to fire. Every decision cut a line across her chest, carving deeper. Command would want answers. They'd want confirmation of the objective, of the target neutralized. They'd want clarity, but what she carried now was anything but clear. At dawn, the radio crackled. Ramirez answered, his voice clipped, professional. Package confirmed, moving east. He hesitated only slightly before saying it, a hesitation she caught, command didn't. When the transmission ended, Ramirez turned on her. "We can't keep this up." She stared back, calm but unyielding. "You lied for me." He gritted his teeth. "I lied for us. You think command's going to care about some kid? They'll call it compromise, liability, you know it." Her gaze drifted to the boy. He was awake now, sitting quietly, his small hands rubbing the sleep from his eyes. He looked at her, not Ramirez, always her. "He's not liability," she said softly. "He's proof." "Proof of what?" Ramirez snapped. She didn't answer, because the truth was still forming inside her, tangled in memory and suspicion, in pain she hadn't yet shared. Collins broke the tension, rubbing his eyes. "We moving soon?" His voice was groggy, but there was a thin edge of fear in it. "Soon," she said. They set out again, the sun crawling higher, the heat pressing down heavy. The terrain grew harsher, ridges slicing the earth into jagged teeth. The boy moved with them, quiet, steady, sometimes stumbling but never complaining. She watched him carefully. Every motion, every glance, he wasn't just surviving, he was navigating. His small steps seemed to know the land. At times, he tugged gently at her sleeve, guiding her away from paths that looked safe but felt wrong. Twice she listened. Twice they avoided what might have been disaster, loose rock that would have echoed down valleys, a clearing where fresh tracks marked ambush. Ramirez noticed too, but instead of gratitude, suspicion darkened his face. "He knows too much," he muttered when they paused for water. "Maybe he's leading us, ever think of that?" She did think of it, the possibility haunted her with every step. But when she looked at the boy, at the raw fear and stubborn trust in his eyes, she couldn't see betrayal, only survival, only a child forced into something far too big for him. As they rested, Collins leaned against a rock, his face pale. He was younger than the rest, less hardened, and the cracks showed. "Ma'am," he said quietly, why'd command pick you for this one?" She didn't answer at first. Her hand traced the rifle across her knees, the cool metal grounding her. Finally, she said, "Because they knew I'd go back." Collins frowned. "Back where?" She looked out across the valley, her chest tightening. "Here." The weight of the words settled heavy between them. Collins didn't press, but his eyes lingered on her, searching as if trying to piece together a story she hadn't told. That night the wind rose, sharp, carrying grit that stung their skin, forcing them to shield their faces. They huddled close, the boy curled once more at her side. His breathing was restless, broken by murmurs in a language half-dreamed. She bent close, listening. A name slipped from his lips, a name she knew. Her heart lurched. No, it couldn't be. That name belonged to someone buried in her past, someone she had lost here on this same soil. Her hand shook as she touched the boy's shoulder, gentle but urgent. "Say it again," she whispered. His eyes blinked open, confused, caught between dream and waking, but he didn't repeat it. Instead, he looked at her, bewildered by her intensity. Ramirez noticed. "What is it?" She forced herself still. "Nothing." But it wasn't nothing, it was everything. The boy rolled over, back into sleep, the cloth still clutched tight in his fist. She sat frozen, staring at him, her mind unraveling. Could it be coincidence, or was fate pulling her deeper into something she couldn't yet comprehend? The storm raged outside their small shelter of rocks, but inside her thoughts screamed louder. She remembered the last time she'd been here, the last mission, the last life she had failed to save, a comrade who hadn't made it out, a comrade who had whispered that same name in her ear with his final breath. And now, years later, a boy carried it in his dreams. Sleep didn't come for her, only memory. She saw it again, the flash, the collapse, the dirt closing over someone she couldn't dig back up, the guilt that had followed her into every mission since, the silence she had wrapped herself in because words had always failed to carry that weight. By morning, the storm had passed, leaving the world washed raw. They moved on, climbing higher into the mountains. Each step felt heavier, as though the earth itself was testing their will. The boy struggled now, exhaustion catching up to him. She lifted him without hesitation, carrying him across stretches of stone. His small arms looped around her neck, his head resting against her shoulder. It felt too familiar, too much like what she had once dreamed life could be, a life that had been taken from her long ago. Ramirez watched but said nothing. His silence was not agreement but weariness. By midday, they reached a plateau where the land opened wide. From here, they could see far into the distance, smoke curling from another village, dots of movement too distant to define. They crouched low, scanning, calculating. Ramirez pulled out binoculars, his jaw tight. "We're not alone, they know we're here." The boy stirred, looking toward the smoke, his body tensed in her arms, his small hand lifted, pointing. She followed his gesture past the smoke, past the visible horizon, to a ridgeline she hadn't noticed at first. "What is it?" she asked softly. The boy didn't speak, just stared, eyes fixed, unblinking. Collins shifted nervously. "We can't follow some kid's finger, we need orders." She closed her eyes briefly, feeling the ache of conflict twist inside her. Orders, duty, survival, and yet the boy hadn't been wrong once. She stood, pulling the rifle over her shoulder, setting the boy gently on his feet. "We follow him." Ramirez cursed under his breath. "You're gambling with all our lives." She met his gaze. "No, I'm trusting something you've forgotten." "And what's that?" Her voice came quiet but sure, instinct. Ramirez looked away, muttering, but he followed. They all did. The boy led them, his steps sure despite his size, weaving through broken paths, narrow cuts in the rock, places that seemed impossible but revealed themselves at the last second. Hours passed, shadows stretched long. At last, they reached a narrow pass where the air grew colder. The boy stopped suddenly, his body tense. He turned to her, eyes wide, almost pleading. She crouched. "What is it?" His lips parted. For the first time words came, quiet, halting, danger. Her breath caught, his voice was small, cracked but clear. The squad froze, every sense sharpened. From the cliffs above, stones shifted, boots scuffed against rock. An ambush. Her rifle came up instantly, heart steady now, no hesitation. The boy's warning had saved them. The first shot cracked the air before the echo of tumbling rocks had even died. She threw herself against the stone wall of the pass, dragging the boy with her, her body shielding his. Dust exploded, shards of rock biting her skin. Contact, Ramirez's roar cut through the chaos, his rifle answering with fire. Collins dove flat, scrambling for cover, eyes wide with the kind of panic that comes when death is suddenly close enough to taste. Above them, dark figures moved along the ridge, rifles flashing, shadows darting like ghosts against the fading light. She pushed the boy down, whispering, "Stay low, don't move." His small hands clutched at her sleeve, trembling but silent, not crying, not breaking. That silence hit her harder than the bullets. Her rifle swung up, sight locked, breath steady. 1, 2, the recoil punched her shoulder, but the shots landed true. A body collapsed, tumbling down the rocks. Another staggered back, disappearing from view. Ramirez barked orders, his voice clipped, efficient. "Collins, left flank, suppress." Collins obeyed, though his shots were wild, fear leaking into every trigger pull. She spared him a glance, too green, too raw, but still fighting, still trying. The boy's eyes tracked everything, wide but sharp, as if memorizing every detail, as if he had seen this before. Grenades arced from above, clattering against stone. "Down," she shouted, throwing her arm around the boy, pressing him into the earth. The blast shook the pass, smoke and fire choking the air. Her ears rang, vision blurred. Through the haze, she saw Ramirez dragging Collins back from an exposed spot, shouting in his face. She blinked hard, forcing the world into focus. The ridge, the shooters, she needed higher ground. "Cover me," she yelled, already moving before Ramirez could argue. She sprinted, boots slipping against loose gravel, her body a blur of motion between bursts of gunfire. Bullets sparked inches from her, carving stone where her head had been moments before. Her mind quieted in those moments, the chaos narrowing into sharp, clean focus. She moved like she had been trained, but also like something deeper, instinct honed by guilt, by memory, by a need that burned hotter than survival. The climb was brutal, fingers tearing against rock, lungs searing. A shadow loomed above her, a gun barrel lowering. She slammed upward, catching the shooter's wrist, twisting hard. The rifle went off wild, the shot vanishing into the sky. She drove her knife into the man's chest, hot breath rushing past her ear as he crumpled. Another figure appeared, raising his weapon, too close, too fast. Her trigger finger squeezed before thought could catch up. The man dropped. And then she was up, crouched on the ridge, rifle braced, raining fire down on the attackers below. The angle turned the fight. Ramirez and Collins surged forward, their shots finding purchase now that the ambushers had lost their edge. Minutes stretched like hours, but slowly, surely, the ridge fell silent. The last figure broke, fleeing into the rocks. Breath ragged, sweat dripping, she scanned for more. Nothing, just bodies, smoke, silence. Ramirez climbed up beside her, his face hard, his chest heaving. He looked down at the scattered dead, then at her. That was suicide. But it worked, she said simply. His jaw clenched. One day it won't. Her gaze dropped to the pass below. The boy was still there, pressed against the rock where she had left him. Collins stood guard, rifle trembling in his hands, eyes darting at every shadow. She made her way back down, each step heavier now that adrenaline was fatting. The boy's eyes met hers immediately, wide, searching. She crouched, brushing dust from his face. You okay? He nodded, silent, but then softly he whispered a word, a name. The same name as before. Her breath caught, the world narrowed. She felt Ramirez's eyes on her, sharp and suspicious. She forced herself steady, brushing the boy's hair back. Good, you did good. They regrouped, dragging themselves into what shelter the rocks allowed. The sun was nearly gone, the world slipping into cold shadow. Collins' hand still shook as he reloaded his weapon. First ambush, Ramirez muttered at him, not unkindly. Welcome to war. Collins tried to laugh, but it cracked, breaking into silence. She sat with the boy tucked close, her rifle across her knees. The echoes of the fight still buzzed in her veins, but louder than that was the name, the one that haunted her. Ramirez finally said it. What's with him? You two keep sharing looks, words, what aren't you telling me? She stiffened. It's nothing. Bullshit, his voice was low-edged. That kid knows things, he knew about the ambush, he's leading us through terrain like he's been trained for it, and now you're looking at him like he's some kind of ghost. She met his stare. Maybe he's just surviving. Maybe he's bait. The words hung heavy. Collins froze mid-motion, his gaze darting between them. The boy shifted closer to her, almost hiding against her side. The trust in that small gesture cut deeper than Ramirez's suspicion. Her hand rested on the boy's shoulder, protective, defiant. He's not bait. Ramirez's jaw worked, frustration etched deep, but he didn't press, not yet. Night fell cold, they built no fire, the risk was too great. Instead, they sat in darkness, listening to the whispers of the wind, the settling of stone. She couldn't sleep. Her mind replayed every detail, the boy's warning, his whispered name, the memory of another voice speaking it years ago. A voice that had been silenced beneath rubble, beneath blood. She had buried that memory, or thought she had. Now it was back, walking beside her in the body of a child. She looked at the boy, his face peaceful in sleep, the cloth still clenched in his fist. Carefully, gently, she tugged it free. By the faint moonlight, she unfolded it. The fabric was torn, dirty, but on its stitching, letters. Her breath stopped. It was a name, the same name. Her hands shook. She pressed the cloth to her chest, the weight of years crashing down on her. Memories surged, her comrade's last stand, his sacrifice, his promise that she had failed to keep. His blood had stained her hands. His name had been her silent torment. And now, here it was again, carried by a boy who should have no reason to know it. Tears burned her eyes, but she blinked them back. She couldn't break, not here, not in front of them. But inside, something shifted. The mission blurred, the orders faded. What remained was sharper, more painful, the chance that this boy wasn't just survival. He was connection, continuation, redemption. She wrapped the cloth back around his hand before he could stir. Her own hand lingered, trembling. Ramirez was watching. His eyes caught the glint of hers in the dark. He said nothing, but the weight of his silence was heavier than any question. The night dragged on, long and unforgiving, but beneath the exhaustion, beneath the fear, a new fire burned in her chest. Not duty, not survival, something far more dangerous. Hope. The call came at dawn, a faint crackle in Ramirez's headset, static chewing the edges of Command's voice. Status. He looked at her, she nodded once, silent permission. Objective neutralized, he said flatly, but complications, local presence, child. Static hissed, then confirm. Ramirez hesitated. She knew what he was waiting for, her word, her confirmation. She leaned in, her voice low, controlled. Yes, a child survivor, he's with us. The pause that followed wasn't static, it was silence, the kind that carried judgment across distance. Then Command's voice, proceed with exfiltration, leave no loose ends. Her stomach twisted, she heard what wasn't said, leave him. Ramirez's eyes flicked to her. Collins, too, the boy oblivious, just sat against the rocks, clutching his cloth like a lifeline. She turned her back on them all, staring out at the valley stretched wide and endless below. Her voice was steady when she said it. Negative, he stays. Static again, then the line cut. Ramirez exhaled hard, muttering a curse. You just signed our death warrants. Then we carry them with pride, she said. Collins shifted uncomfortably. He looked younger in that moment than ever. Ma'am, what if Command's right? What if he slows us down? She crouched in front of the boy, searching his face. Dirt, fear, resilience. His eyes locked on hers and she saw it again, the unspoken plea, the stubborn will to survive. He doesn't slow us down, she said. He reminds us why we're still moving. Collins didn't argue, not out loud, but the doubt in his eyes lingered. They broke camp fast, shadows still long on the ground. The climb out of the pass was brutal, the air thin, each step heavier than the last. By midday, the boy stumbled. She caught him before he fell, hoisting him onto her back without a word. His small arms wrapped around her neck, his breath warm against her skin. The weight wasn't much, but the meaning was crushing. Memories bled through with every step. A small hand in hers once, years ago, a girl's laughter echoing off apartment walls. The same warmth at her neck when bedtime stories had been the hardest mission of the day. Until that day, until rubble, smoke, and silence replaced it all. She blinked hard, forcing the memory back into its cage. Not now, not here. But the boy stirred against her shoulder, murmuring in sleep. The same name again, that cursed sacred name. She nearly stumbled. Ramirez caught it, his eyes narrowed, his jaw set, but again he said nothing for now. By nightfall they reached a ruined village. Stone houses collapsed into themselves, doors hanging from broken frames. Collins whispered, "What happened here?" Ramirez answered, voice cold. Same thing that happens everywhere when war forgets who lives inside the walls. They took shelter in what remained of a house, its roof gone, its walls cracked. The boy sat curled in the corner, knees tucked to his chest. She sat near him, rifle resting across her lap, but her attention locked elsewhere. On the memories clawing at her ribs, on the cloth she had seen, on the name she had buried. Ramirez finally spoke. His voice was quiet but edged like a blade. You going to tell us or keep playing ghost? She didn't look at him. Tell you what? That boy, that name, don't act like it doesn't mean something. Her fingers tightened on her rifle. Collins glanced nervously between them, caught in the storm. She inhaled slowly. Once, a long time ago, there was a man, a friend, a soldier. He saved me more times than I can count, and one day I couldn't save him. His name was... She stopped herself, the word lodged like glass in her throat. Ramirez didn't push, his silence said enough. The boy shifted, eyes flicking toward her. He had been listening. She saw it in the way he gripped the cloth tighter, his small body tense. She whispered to him, softer than the wind, "Why do you know that name?" But he didn't answer, just lowered his gaze, retreating into silence. The night dragged on, thick with unspoken truths. At one point, Collins broke it, his voice shaking. What if Command tracks us? They'll know we disobeyed, they'll come. Ramirez gave a humorless laugh. They always come. Her eyes stayed on the boy. Then we make sure we're ready. Sleep never came, not really. Every sound in the ruins felt amplified, every silence stretched too long. And when dawn broke, it came with fire. Mortars screamed in, tearing the village apart. Stone exploded, dust filling the air. The squad dove for cover, dragging the boy between them. Contact left, Ramirez roared, already returning fire. Figures swarmed from the outskirts, weapons blazing, too many, too fast. She shoved the boy into a crawlspace beneath broken beams. Stay down no matter what. His eyes locked on hers, wide with terror, but he nodded. Then she was up, rifle cracking, body moving with lethal precision. Collins fired beside her, panic lacing his aim but hitting enough to matter. Ramirez held the flank, cursing with every shot. The village became a battlefield, every ruined wall a shield, every shattered window a muzzle flash. And through it all, her mind split again, half on the fight, half on the boy beneath the rubble. At one point, a figure broke through, too close. She spun, driving her knife deep, blood hot against her hands. The man fell, but another was already there. Gunfire tore the air. The attacker dropped, Collins standing behind him, smoke rising from his barrel, his face pale, his eyes wide. She met his gaze, nodding once, good. But there was no time for more. The fight raged endless. Until finally silence. The last attacker fell, the air burned with smoke and blood. They regrouped, battered, scraped, alive. Collins dropped to the ground, shaking. Ramirez's hand was slick with blood, a graze down his arm. She pulled the boy from the crawlspace. He flew into her arms, clutching her like the world had ended. She held him tight, whispering, "It's over, you're safe." But she knew it wasn't true, not yet, not ever. Ramirez staggered closer, eyes hard. That was no random strike. They knew where we'd be. Someone's feeding them. Collins froze. You think? His eyes flicked to the boy. Her voice cut sharp. Don't. But the doubt hung heavy in the air. The boy looked up at her, confusion in his eyes. He didn't understand the words, but he understood the tone, the suspicion. She hugged him tighter, shielding him not just from bullets, but from the weight of blame. Because deep down she knew the truth wasn't about him, the truth was about her. The name, the cloth, the past she had dragged into this mission. And for the first time she asked herself, not if she could protect him, but if she deserved to. The wind carried ash through the ruins, soft and gray, like snow that burned instead of soothed. She sat against a shattered wall, the boy curled in her lap, his small frame finally limp with exhausted sleep. Her hand traced the air just above his hair, not touching, afraid of breaking the fragile calm he had carved out of chaos. But her eyes never closed. They stayed fixed on Ramirez, packing the edge of the rubble, his face carved from stone. Collins sat nearby, cradling his rifle too tightly, his breath shallow. The tremors in his hands hadn't stopped since the ambush. He kept looking at her, at the boy, at Ramirez, like he knew a storm was about to break. It came with the crackle of the radio, a voice sharp, commanding, alive with authority. Team report. Ramirez snatched the handset before she could move. His voice was clipped, still alive, objective complete, multiple engagements, casualties avoided. He hesitated, then added, one civilian still with us. The pause on the other end was suffocating. Then, negative on civilian retention, you are ordered to release or terminate, copy. The word terminate sliced through the silence. Collins flinched, his rifle slipped against the rubble. The boy stirred, murmuring softly, pressing closer into her chest. She held him tighter, her pulse thundering in her ears. Ramirez looked at her, not a glare, not anger, just waiting. She shook her head once final. Ramirez's jaw flexed. Command negative, civilian remains with team, will exfil on foot. Static hissed, then the voice sharpened, steel cutting through. That is insubordination, you will obey or you will be abandoned, do you copy? Ramirez's thumb hovered over the handset, his eyes locked on hers, the weight of choice pressed between them. She whispered low, only for him, we don't abandon him, not him. For a long second, Ramirez didn't move. Then slow, deliberate, he let the radio fall silent. The boy exhaled against her chest, unaware of the war that had just been waged without bullets. Collins whispered, barely audible, what happens now? Ramirez's answer was blunt, we're ghosts cut loose. The words hung heavy, no resupply, no extraction, no backup, just four souls in the endless, merciless terrain. Night fell cold and unkind. They didn't light a fire, just huddled in the ruins, each alone with their thoughts. She lay awake, listening to the boy's breath steady against her, watching the stars carve silence across the sky. And in the stillness, memory slipped in again. A doorway, a little girl, hair tangled, eyes bright, laughing at nothing but the joy of being alive. The sound had filled rooms, softened edges, made the world bearable. Until one night, sirens smoke, walls collapsing, her arms clawing at rubble, fingers bleeding, lungs breaking from dust, and then silence, too final, too cruel. She had carried that silence into every mission, buried it beneath orders, but it had never left her. Now, with this boy in her arms, it was awake again, demanding answers she wasn't ready to face. By dawn, Ramirez was already moving, restless, eyes scanning every shadow and enemy. Collins dragged his feet, exhaustion dragging his face hollow, but he still followed, still tried. They trekked across ridges, through narrow gorges, across fields where grass bent in the wind like whispers. By midday, the boy spoke again, just one word, that name, the one she had avoided. Her heart clenched, she crouched, gripping his shoulders. Where did you hear that? Who told you? The boy's eyes glistened. He touched the cloth, then pointed at her chest, then at the sky, then at himself. She froze. Ramirez caught it, his voice was sharp. What's he saying? She swallowed hard, her throat felt carved from stone. He thinks he knows who I lost. Ramirez's stare burned into her, and do you? She didn't answer, couldn't. Collins finally broke, his voice cracked like dry wood. I don't understand, why are we risking everything for a kid who shouldn't even be here, for ghosts? Her voice was quiet, but it carried weight. Because once someone risked everything for me and I couldn't return it, not then, not for them, but I can now. The silence that followed was thick, suffocating. Collins looked away, Ramirez just stared. They moved on, but the ground between them felt fractured. That night they found shelter in a cave. The boy curled against her, drifting into sleep. Collins sat near the entrance, his back stiff, his rifle across his knees. Ramirez leaned against the wall, sharpening his blade in slow, measured strokes. Finally, he said it, you know this ends badly. She looked at him, maybe. No, maybe, command won't let it go, they'll come. And when they do, that boy will be the reason we all die. She didn't flinch, or the reason we remember what it means to live. Ramirez's eyes hardened. That's not soldier talk. No, she said softly, that's human talk. The cave fell into silence again. Only the sound of the boy's breathing, only the weight of unspoken truths. Collins shifted restless, his voice came small, brittle. I joined to make my dad proud. He never thought I could handle this, said I wasn't built for it, and maybe he was right. I'm scared every damn second. The confession cracked the air, honest, raw. Ramirez didn't mock, didn't scold, just said quietly, we're all scared. Difference is some of us keep walking anyway. Collins's shoulders sagged, but his eyes lifted, finding hers, searching for something, approval, guidance, anything. She gave him a small nod, the kind that said, you're enough even when you think you're not. And for the first time, Collins didn't look like he was about to break. But she knew it was fragile, all of it was fragile. Because in the dark edges of her mind she felt it, the storm gathering, the reckoning she had been pushing away. And when it came, she knew the boy's name, the cloth, the ghosts of her past, they would all collide. And someone would pay the cost. Dawn bled red across the horizon. The sky looked wounded, streaked with fire and ash, as if the world itself had been torn open. She tightened her grip on the boy's hand, guiding him over the rocky slope. His legs trembled with each step, but he didn't let go, not once. Behind them, Collins dragged his boots, every breath a war. Ramirez walked ahead, eyes sharp, blade at his side, scanning the land like it might bite them at any second. The silence between them wasn't empty, it was charged, brittle, heavy with things unsaid. By midday, the ground opened into a valley. Scorched vehicles lay rusted and blackened, bones of a war that refused to die. The boy stopped, staring at a twisted jeep, eyes wide, lips trembling. He whispered something in a language too soft to catch. Her chest ached, she crouched, brushing hair from his forehead. Not here, not now. But he pointed again, to a patch of ground where grass grew stubborn through the ash, something buried beneath, something once loved. Before she could move, the air cracked, gunfire. They dropped instantly, instinct, muscle memory, years of survival snapping them down. Collins's hands shook as he raised his rifle. Where is it coming from? Ramirez growled low, upridge, 2 o'clock. The boy whimpered, she pressed him flat against the dirt, shielding him with her body. Her heart thundered. Command hadn't let them go, of course not. Figures moved along the ridge, black silhouettes, rifles glinting in the broken sun. A voice boomed through a loudspeaker, cold, familiar. You are harboring an unauthorized civilian. This is your final warning, comply or be neutralized. Her blood froze, that voice, she knew it, not just command, it was him. The one who had given the order years ago, the one who had sent her squad into fire and left her little sister under rubble. Her vision blurred, past and present collided, raw and violent. Ramirez hissed, we can fight, but we won't win. Collins's voice cracked, so what do we do? She looked at the boy, his small face streaked with dirt and fear, clutching the cloth like it was armor. Her throat burned, not again, not another child, not this one. She stood. Ramirez cursed, what the hell are you? But she ignored him. The loudspeaker barked, identify yourself. Her voice rang across the valley, sharp and clear. I'm the one you tried to bury, the one you left with nothing, and you will not take him. Silence answered, then you are already dead. Gunfire erupted. She grabbed Collins, yanking him down as bullets chewed the dirt. Ramirez fired back, his shots precise, controlled. The boy cried out, covering his ears, trembling under the weight of thunder. She pushed him toward the rocks. Stay there, don't move, no matter what. The firefight blazed. Collins screamed, blind fire bursting from his rifle. Ramirez covered their flank, a wall of fury. But the enemy was endless, shadows spilling like a tide. A bullet tore through her shoulder. She staggered but didn't fall. Pain flared white-hot, but she forced it down. She met Ramirez's eyes, both knew they couldn't hold, not together, not like this. So she made the choice. Take him, she shouted, shoving the boy into Ramirez's arms. Get him out. Ramirez shook his head violently, no. Now her voice broke, don't let my mistake happen twice. Ramirez froze for one breath, then he nodded, face hard, eyes burning. He lifted the boy, who screamed, reaching for her. Go, she screamed. Collins hesitated, eyes wide, shaking. What about? She grabbed his wrist, forced his rifle into his chest. You want to prove you're more than scared? Cover them. Be the soldier you never believed you could be. Tears streaked his dirt-stained face, but he nodded. He followed Ramirez, firing clumsy bursts as they ran. And she turned toward the ridge, toward the shadows, toward him. Bullets ripped the earth around her, but she walked forward, steady, certain. Her voice carried, fierce and unbroken. You can kill me, but you'll never own him. The loudspeaker cracked, laughter cruel hollow. You're just one woman, one broken soldier. She lifted her chin, her eyes burned with everything she had lost, everything she had found. One is enough. She charged. The world became fire. Bullets cut, shrapnel screamed, the air burned red. She moved through it all, a storm wrapped in flesh, every step a refusal, every breath a rebellion. She didn't stop until she saw his face, the commander, older, colder, but still the same, the one who had turned her life to ash. And she smiled. The blast swallowed them both. Silence. The valley lay scorched, smoke curling into the sky. The ridge was shattered, bodies scattered like broken promises. Far away, Ramirez ran. The boy clutched in his arms, Collins stumbling beside him, tears cutting through soot. The boy screamed her name until his voice broke. Ramirez didn't stop, couldn't. He carried the boy like a promise, like a debt that would never be repaid. Collins turned once, looking back at the smoke. His rifle slipped from his grip. He whispered she wasn't scared. Ramirez didn't answer, he just kept running. Above them the sky began to clear, not bright, not kind, but open, wide, waiting. The boy pressed the cloth to his chest, sobbing. And though she was gone, though silence claimed the valley, her choice remained. Not in the ruins, not in the ashes, but in the boy's survival. In the truth that she had finally kept her promise. She wasn't fighting for herself. She was fighting for him. And for once she had won.